Lieutenant Alan Murphy stood perfectly still near the back wall of the grand reception hall aboard the Celestial Nexus. The massive space station served as the diplomatic hub for the Galactic Coalition, and tonight it hosted representatives from all 27 member species. As one of only 6 humans present, Alan tried his best to blend into the background. It wasn't hard to do. Most aliens towered over his 6-foot frame, and few bothered to acknowledge humans at these functions anyway. 20 years since first contact, and humanity was still treated like the unwanted stepchild of the galaxy. Alan sipped his drink, a mild fruit beverage since he was on duty, and observed the gathering with practiced patience. Captain Susan Woods had ordered him to attend as Earth's military liaison, though they both knew it was mostly a symbolic gesture. The Coalition rarely took human input seriously, especially in matters of defense. And here we have a fine specimen of Earth's mighty warriors, came a booming voice that silenced nearby conversations. Alan turned to see Commander Zix Vorel approaching, the Arcturian's blue-scaled skin gleaming under the hall's lights. Standing nearly 8 feet tall with 4 muscular arms, Zix Vorel commanded the respect of everyone in the room. Everyone except Alan. "Lieutenant Murphy, isn't it?" The commander's translator conveyed his words with perfect clarity, but couldn't hide the mocking tone. "I was just telling my colleagues about your species' fascinating tendency to exaggerate." Alan nodded politely. "Commander, I trust you're enjoying the reception." "Indeed. We were discussing military history. Your Captain Woods mentioned Earth's resistance during first contact." Zix Vorel's upper arms crossed while his lower pair gestured dramatically. "Such colorful stories you humans tell." A small crowd had gathered now, various alien diplomats and officers watching with interest. Alan recognized representatives from the insectoid Silcat and the crystalline Forus among them. "Our records are accurate, Commander," Alan said quietly. "Are they?" Zix Vorel's mouth parts twisted in what passed for an Arcturian smile. "Your historical archives claim that during the Battle of Dallas, a mere 50 human soldiers held off an advanced alien force for 3 days, with projectile weapons and explosive devices no more sophisticated than children's toys by galactic standards." A ripple of clicking and whistling, alien laughter, spread through the onlookers. "The Battle of Dallas is well documented," Alan replied, his voice level despite the heat rising in his chest. "Those soldiers saved thousands of civilians." "Or perhaps," Zix Vorel continued as if Alan hadn't spoken, "we should discuss the supposedly legendary Chicago defense, where your people claim a handful of civilian pilots and atmospheric aircraft destroyed 3 orbital warships." The alien commander turned to his audience. "Next, they'll tell us a single human could defeat a Croton war beast with their bare hands." This brought louder laughter. Alan's fingers tightened around his glass. His parents had died in Chicago, flying those atmospheric aircraft in a desperate gambit that saved the city. He had been 14, watching from a shelter as the sky burned. "Commander," Alan began, fighting to keep his voice professional, "the historical record is embellished, Lieutenant, as all primitive species do when facing superior technology." Zix Vorel waved a dismissive hand. "It's a psychological defense mechanism. Understandable, but not to be taken seriously in professional military circles." Alan felt a gentle touch on his arm. Captain Woods had appeared beside him, her gray eyes warning him to stay calm. "Commander Zix Vorel," she said with practiced diplomacy, "perhaps we could continue this fascinating discussion another time. I believe Ambassador Trell was hoping to speak with you about the new defense pact." Before the Arcturian could respond, a sharp tone sounded throughout the hall. The station's communication system activated, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. "Priority alert to all Coalition military personnel," announced a calm, computerized voice. "Distress signal received from research outpost. Epsilon 9 in the Outer Rim. Last transmission reports unknown hostiles. All available response units prepare for immediate deployment." The reception immediately transformed as military officers separated from diplomats. Captain Woods touched her communication band, receiving details directly from Earth Command. "Lieutenant Murphy," she called. "With me." Alan followed her to a quieter corner of the room, aware of Zix Vorel watching them closely. Epsilon 9 is a joint xenobiology facility, Woods explained quietly. 3 human researchers are stationed there along with 22 other coalition scientists. The distress call cut off mid-transmission, but what we got isn't good. She showed him the partial message on her data pad. Alan's blood cooled as he watched the fragmented video. A panicked researcher, something moving in the background, unnatural, growth spreading across lab surfaces. This pattern looks familiar, Alan said, enlarging a section of the image. I thought the same thing, like the Harbinger incident reports. Alan nodded grimly. The Harbinger incident had been classified after first contact, another exaggerated human encounter that the Coalition preferred to ignore. Command wants you on the response team, Woods continued. Your background in both xenobiology and tactical response makes you our best option. The Coalition will send their own team, Alan said. Yes, and you'll be joining them. Orders from Admiral Turner herself. Woods looked him directly in the eyes. This is important, Alan. Not just for those researchers, but for us. Earth needs to be part of this response. Alan understood the unspoken message. If humans wanted respect in the Coalition, they needed to prove themselves whenever the opportunity arose. Commander Zix Vorel will lead the mission, Woods added more quietly. Alan kept his expression neutral despite his sinking feeling. Of course it would be Zix Vorel. When do I leave? He asked. Immediately. Report to Docking Bay 14. The GCS Intrepid is being prepped now. As if on cue, Zix Vorel approached them, his massive frame casting a shadow over both humans. Captain Woods, the commander said, I've received word that your lieutenant is being assigned to my response team. His 4 eyes narrowed. Is this some kind of diplomatic gesture? I assure you this mission requires experienced personnel, not symbolic representation. Lieutenant Murphy has extensive experience with xenobiological contamination protocols, Woods replied smoothly. And he's personally handled 3 hostile first contact scenarios on newly discovered worlds. Has he? Zix Vorel looked Alan up and down with new, if skeptical interest. Well, Lieutenant, I hope your actual capabilities match your species' colorful historical accounts. Report to my ship in 30 minutes. Try not to get lost on the way. With that, the commander turned and strode away, his powerful frame parting. The crowd effortlessly. Captain Woods squeezed Alan's shoulder. You know what this means for Earth? Alan nodded. I won't let you down, Captain. I know. She smiled slightly. Show them what humans can do, Lieutenant. Not with words, with action. As Alan left the reception hall, heading toward his quarters, to gather his gear, he thought about his parents and their sacrifice. About all the human stories that aliens like Zix Vorel dismissed as legends. Soon enough, the commander would learn that some legends were made of truth. The GCS Intrepid cut through space at maximum speed, its advanced engines pushing the vessel toward the distant research outpost. Alan sat alone in the ship's small mess hall, reviewing the limited data they had received about Epsilon 9's situation. The other response team members kept their distance following their commander's example. Studying hard human, Alan looked up to see Rixtal, a younger Arcturian who shared Commander Zix Vorel's blue-scaled appearance but lacked his imposing size. Like all junior officers of his species, Rixtal had only 2 fully developed arms, with the lower pair still growing to adult proportion. Just preparing for the mission, Alan replied evenly. Rixtal made a clicking sound with his mouth parts. Don't strain yourself. You're here as a political gesture. Commander Zix Vorel will handle the real work. Is that what he told you? He didn't need to. The young alien sat across from Alan uninvited. Everyone knows humans exaggerate their capabilities. Your kind is physically weak with no natural defenses and limited sensory abilities. Alan had heard it all before. Instead of arguing, he turned his datapad to show Rixtal the fragmented distress call from Epsilon 9. Have you seen these growth patterns before? Alan asked. The young Arcturian hesitated, then leaned forward to look. Some kind of biological contamination? That's what we need to find out. Alan zoomed in on a specific section, but the way it's spreading isn't random. See how it follows the power conduits? Before Rixtal could respond, the ship's intercom activated. All response team members report to the briefing room. Arrival at Epsilon 9 in 20 minutes. The briefing room was already crowded when Alan arrived. He counted 12 specialists from 7 different species. Commander Zix Vorel stood at the head of the table, his forearms braced against its surface as he surveyed his team. Our mission is simple, the commander began. We secure the station, locate survivors, and contain any threats. Based on the partial transmission, we're likely dealing with a biological contamination, possibly from research samples. A tall reptilian alien raised a clawed hand. What kind of samples were they working with at this outpost? Standard xenobiological research, Zix Vorel replied. Nothing particularly dangerous according to the manifest. Dr. Santos will elaborate. A human woman with dark hair pulled into a tight bun stepped forward. Alan recognized Dr. Mira Santos from Earth's Science Division. Epsilon 9 was primarily studying extremophile adaptation, she explained. How different organisms evolve to survive harsh environments. Nothing that should cause the scenario we glimpsed in the distress call. Alan cleared his throat. The growth patterns resemble a case from Earth's first contact records. The Harbinger incident. Commander Zix Vorel's 4 eyes narrowed. Another human legend, Lieutenant? Please spare us your colorful war stories. It's not a story, Alan insisted. It's a documented case of biomechanical infiltration. The entity bonds with electronic systems as well as organic material. Impossible, said a crystalline forest scientist. Biological and electronic integration at that level would require advanced engineering, not natural evolution. Unless it's not natural, Alan replied. The commander dismissed this with a wave. We will follow standard coalition protocols. Lieutenant Murphy, you will assist Dr. Santos with biological sample collection. Stay out of the way of the security team. Alan understood the assignment for what it was. Busy work to keep the human occupied. But at least he'd be working with another human. The Intrepid slowed as it approached Epsilon 9. Through the briefing room's viewport, Alan could see the research outpost, a circular hub with 3 extending arms designed to orbit a small rocky moon. Something was wrong with its rotation. The station moved erratically as if its stabilizers were malfunctioning. No response to hails, reported the communication officer. Life support is active, but internal communications are down. Prepare for boarding, Commander Zix Vorel ordered. Team assignments as discussed. We enter through the main airlock in Sector A. As the team dispersed to prepare, Dr. Santos approached Alan. I read about the Harbinger incident when I was in training, she said quietly. Do you really think it's the same thing? Alan checked that no one was within earshot. The growth patterns match. If it is similar, we need to be careful about electronic exposure. The entity could spread through the station's systems. She nodded, grimly. I'll prep isolated sample containers. 30 minutes later, the response team had docked with Epsilon 9 and breached the main airlock. Commander Zix Vorel led the way, with 4 security specialists following close behind. Alan and Dr. Santos were positioned near the back with the scientific team. The station's interior was dimly lit by emergency lighting. The air felt thick and humid, unusual for the controlled environment of a space station. Life signs scattered throughout the facility, reported Trencor, the reptilian security specialist, checking a handheld scanner. But they're strange, clustered and moving slowly. Alan activated his own scanner, noting the unusual readings. Commander, these signatures don't match normal biological patterns for any coalition species. Your equipment must be malfunctioning. Zix Vorel replied without looking back. Calibrate it properly. They moved deeper into the station, passing through the main corridor toward the central hub. Alan noticed thin, vein-like growths along the walls, spreading from power junctions and terminal interfaces. Exactly like the Harbinger records. Commander, he called. These growths are interfacing with the station's electronic systems. We should continue with the mission, Zix Vorel interrupted. Your observations are noted, Lieutenant. The team reached the central hub, a large circular room filled with research stations and monitoring equipment. The growths were thicker here, pulsing with faint bioluminescence. Several terminals flickered with strange patterns, code scrolling at impossible speeds. Spreading throughout the system, muttered the faux-res scientist examining a terminal. Fascinating. It appears to be learning. A loud bang echoed from one of the side corridors, followed by a scraping sound. Commander Zixvaral motioned for the security team to investigate. Be cautious, Alan warned. If this is what I think it is, your theories are not required, Lieutenant, the commander said sharply. Focus on your assigned tasks. The security team moved toward the noise, weapons ready. Alan exchanged glances with Dr. Santos, who looked increasingly concerned. The samples, she whispered. We should check the primary lab. If something escaped containment. Before they could move, a terrible screeching sound filled the hub. One of the security specialists came running back into the room, blue blood streaming from a gash in his arm. Something attacked Vorik, he gasped. It moved so fast, a shape burst through the doorway behind him. A twisted mass of what once might have been one of the station's researchers. The body was covered in the same vein-like growths that lined the walls, with metallic components, fused to organic tissue. Its movements were jerky but purposeful as it lunged toward the injured security officer. Commander Zixvaral fired his energy weapon without hesitation. The blast hit the creature directly, burning away tissue. But the growths rapidly reformed, pulling nearby electronic components into the damaged area. Fall back, Alan shouted. Standard weapons won't stop it. For once, the commander didn't argue. Defensive positions. All units. Fire at will. As chaos erupted in the hub, Alan knew with grim certainty that his worst fears were confirmed. The Harbinger had returned and no one was prepared for what was coming. Chaos filled the central hub as more creatures poured in from connecting corridors. No longer human or alien, the transformed researchers moved with unnatural speed, their bodies fused with mechanical parts and covered in pulsing growths. Retreat. To the ship, Commander Zixvaral ordered, firing continuously with his energy weapon. Each blast slowed the creatures momentarily, but their wounds sealed almost instantly. Alan grabbed Dr. Santos by the arm and pulled her behind a research station. Standard weapons won't work, he shouted over the noise of battle. We need to disrupt their network. How? She asked, eyes wide with fear. Alan pulled a small device from his belt. Emergency pulse generator. It might buy us time. The security team formed a defensive line, but 2 more officers had already fallen. The reptilian Trencor roared as he fired his heavy weapon, creating a path toward the exit. Move! He called to the scientists. We cannot hold them long. Alan activated his pulse generator and threw it into the center of the room. Cover your equipment. The device hit the floor and exploded in a wave of blue energy. The creatures froze momentarily, their movements becoming erratic. The electronic components in their bodies sparked and smoked. Now! Alan shouted. While they're disoriented, the team rushed toward the exit corridor carrying their wounded. Commander Zixvaral brought up the rear, still firing at the recovering creatures. What was that device? The commander demanded once they had sealed the corridor door behind them. EMP generator, Alan explained quickly. Disrupts electronic systems. It's standard equipment for human officers. You disabled our communications as well. Zixvaral growled. Better than being killed, Alan replied. Those things are using the station's systems to communicate. They function as a network. The commander's 4 eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more as they hurried toward the airlock. The growths were spreading along the walls, seeming to follow their movements. They're adapting, Dr. Santos said, scanning the growths with her handheld device, learning from each encounter. When they reached the airlock, they found it sealed and unresponsive. Lieutenant Peter Johnson, the communications specialist, tried to override the controls. The system is locked, he reported. Something in the main computer is blocking access. Can we cut through? Asked Rixtall. Not without compromising the airlock integrity, Johnson replied. We'd all die. We need a different exit, Alan said, pulling up the station schematics on his datapad. There's an emergency shuttle bay in Section C. That's on the other side of the station, the commander pointed out. Through the contaminated areas. There's a maintenance tunnel that runs alongside the main corridors, Alan countered. It's narrow, but should get us there. Commander Zix Vorel looked at the wounded team members, then at the spreading growths around them. For the first time, Alan saw uncertainty in the alien's posture. Very well, the commander finally said. Lead the way, Lieutenant. Alan found the maintenance access panel and pulled it open. The tunnel beyond was dimly lit and barely wide enough for the larger aliens to squeeze through. I'll go first, Alan said. Dr. Santos, you follow. Commander, have your security team cover our rear. Without waiting for the commander's approval, Alan entered the tunnel. It was a tight fit even for him. The Arcturians with their broader frames would struggle significantly. The growths haven't penetrated this area yet, Alan called back. It must not be connected to the main power grid. The team moved slowly through the tunnel, the wounded whimpering in pain. Behind them, they could hear metallic scraping sounds. The creatures had found the access panel. They're following us, whispered Dr. Santos. After 20 minutes of crawling through the narrow space, they reached another access panel. Alan checked his scanner. We're near the secondary lab, he said. We should be able to cut across to the shuttle bay from there. Is it clear? Asked the commander, who had been unusually quiet during their journey. Alan's scanner showed movement. No, there are several life signs, but they're not like the creatures we saw. They're normal. Survivors? Dr. Santos suggested hopefully. Maybe. Alan tried to sound optimistic, but something felt wrong. Let's proceed carefully. He opened the panel and found himself looking into a laboratory much like the central hub, but smaller. Several researchers were working at stations, apparently unaffected by whatever had transformed the others. Dr. Hayes? Dr. Santos called, out in surprise, recognizing a tall man with graying hair. The man turned, his face showing momentary shock before settling into a calm smile. Dr. Santos, Lieutenant Murphy, what a pleasant surprise. What's happening here? Alan asked, keeping his hand near his weapon. The rest of the station is overrun. Yes, quite unfortunate, Dr. Hayes replied with unsettling calmness. My team and I have managed to isolate ourselves. The organisms seem to respect our boundaries. The rest of the response team emerged from the tunnel. Commander Zix Vorel stepped forward, towering over the human scientist. Explain yourself, Doctor. What is this contamination? Dr. Hayes smiled. Not contamination, Commander. Evolution. We've unlocked something remarkable here. A true biomechanical fusion capable of self-replication and adaptation. You created these things? Alan asked in disbelief. Created? No. Discovered and improved. Hayes gestured to the lab equipment. We found samples in the deep archives, remnants of an ancient species that once dominated this sector. They were called the Void Hive. Alan felt a chill. The Void Hive were wiped out 10,000 years ago. They nearly destroyed all life in this sector. Precisely, Hayes said with disturbing enthusiasm. A species that achieved perfect symbiosis between biological and technological evolution, the ultimate adaptation. Commander Zix Vorel stepped closer to Hayes, his massive frame looming over the human scientist. You have committed crimes against the Coalition. These experiments are forbidden. Forbidden because you fear them, Hayes replied. Because you know their potential. Because they killed millions, Alan countered, including many of my people. During first contact, this caught the commander's attention. What do you mean, Lieutenant? The Void Hive remnants were what attacked Earth first, Alan explained, never taking his eyes off Hayes. Before the Coalition arrived, we called them the Harbingers. They infiltrated our systems, transformed humans, tried to take over. We fought them off, but at great cost. Hayes clapped slowly. Bravo, Lieutenant. Few know that history. The Coalition prefers to pretend they were Earth's first alien contact. You're working with Void Hive technology, Alan said. That's why you've been spared. Working with it? Hayes laughed. I control it, all of it. Every creature, every growth. They answer to me now. As if on cue, the other researchers turned toward the response team, their eyes vacant. Alan noticed small implants at the base of their necks, pulsing with the same light as the growths. "And now," Hayes continued, "you have a choice. Join us willingly, or become part of the hive by force." Behind them, the access panel burst open as creatures poured into the lab. The team was surrounded, caught between two threats with nowhere to run. Commander Zixvorl raised his weapon, but Hayes shook his head. "I wouldn't do that, Commander. My friends respond poorly to violence." For the first time, Alan saw real fear in the commander's eyes. The mighty Arcturian was out of options, facing an enemy he didn't understand. "Dr. Hayes," Alan said, stepping forward. "This isn't who we are. Humans don't sacrifice others for power. Don't we, Lieutenant?" Hayes smiled coldly. "Perhaps you've forgotten how desperate our species was after first contact, how eager to catch up to the Coalition's technology. Some of us were willing to try alternate methods." The creatures moved closer, herding the team together. Alan's mind raced, searching for a way out. He noticed a pattern in the creatures' movements. They were avoiding certain areas of the lab. "Commander," Alan whispered, "on my signal, target the environmental controls. Panel to your right." The Arcturian gave a nearly imperceptible nod. At least now he was willing to listen. Hayes spread his arms wide. "The future begins today. You should feel honored to be part of it. Now." Alan shouted, diving for a nearby console. Commander Zixvorl fired at the environmental panel. It exploded in a shower of sparks, triggering the emergency systems. Freezing gas poured into the room as the temperature plummeted. The creatures screamed, a sound that was both mechanical and organic, as their movements slowed in the extreme cold. "Run!" Alan yelled, pointing to a side door. "To the shuttle bay!" As they fled, Alan looked back to see Hayes calmly watching them go, unaffected by the cold, a small smile on his face. The hunt was just beginning. The shuttle bay doors slammed shut behind them, the heavy metal groaning as the locking mechanisms engaged. Alan quickly moved to the control panel, overriding the system to prevent remote access. "That won't hold them for long," he said, breathing hard from their run through the station's corridors. These creatures adapt quickly. The shuttle bay contained 3 small transport vessels designed for emergency evacuation. 2 appeared intact, while the third had been partially dismantled, its components scattered across the floor. Commander Zixvorl surveyed their group. Of the original 12-member response team, only 8 remained. 2 security specialists had been killed in the initial attack, and 2 scientists had been separated during their escape from Hayes' lab. "Status report," the commander ordered, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. 3 seriously wounded, reported Dr. Santos as she tended to a FORES scientist with a deep gash across its crystalline body. Limited medical supplies. Communications are still down, added Peter Johnson. "I can't reach the Intrepid." "The ships?" Zixvorl asked, turning to Alan. Alan was already checking the nearest shuttle systems. "Power cells at 60%, life support functional, weapons," he paused, "minimal. These are evacuation vessels, not combat ships." Rixtal approached the commander. "Sir, we should leave immediately. Get help from the Coalition fleet. And let that human madman escape with Void Hive technology?" Zixvorl shook his head. "The threat must be contained here." Alan looked up from the shuttle's controls. "Commander, Hayes has clearly been planning this for months, maybe years. He's controlling the creatures somehow. If we don't stop him now, he could spread this infection beyond the station." "I agree with the human," said Trencor, the reptilian security specialist. His scales were stained with blue blood from a wound on his shoulder. "We must end this here." For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of their situation hung in the recycled air of the shuttle bay. Then a loud bang echoed from the sealed doors, followed by another. The creatures were trying to break through. "We need a plan," Dr. Santos said, her voice steady despite her fear. Alan activated the station schematics on his datapad. "Hayes must have a control center, something that lets him direct the void hive organisms. He studied the layout. The station's primary server room would be ideal. It connects to all systems. Here, the commander pointed to a location on the map, Section D near the power core. If we can reach it, we might be able to disrupt his control, Alan suggested. Maybe even shut down the creatures entirely. Another bang at the doors, louder this time. Metal creaked under stress. Those doors won't last much longer, warned Johnson. Commander Zix Vorel straightened to his full height, his forearms flexing. We split up. One team takes a shuttle back to the Intrepid with the wounded. The other team goes for the server room. Sir, Rixtal began to protest, but the commander cut him off. That's an order. Dr. Santos, you'll lead the evacuation team. Lieutenant Johnson, assist her. The commander turned to Alan. Lieutenant Murphy, you claim to have experience with these creatures. You'll join the strike team. Alan nodded, surprised by the commander's decision. We'll need weapons that work against them. I have an idea about that, Alan said. He moved to the partially dismantled shuttle and began pulling components from its exposed engine core. Help me with this. Working quickly, Alan modified their weapons, explaining as he worked. The creatures are sensitive to electromagnetic disruption. If we reverse the polarity on our energy weapons and add these power amplifiers, we should be able to cause more permanent damage. Trencor watched, with interest. How did you learn this, human? The Harbinger incident, Alan replied without looking up from his work. My parents were part of the response team in Chicago. Before they died, they discovered this weakness. The reptilian placed a clawed hand on Alan's shoulder. Then their knowledge lives on through you, a warrior's greatest legacy. The commander observed silently as Alan finished the modifications. When he handed Zix Vorel his enhanced weapon, their eyes met. This will work? The Arcturian asked quietly. It should, Alan replied, but nothing is certain with void hive technology. They adapt. A loud crack echoed through the bay as the doors began to buckle. Time to move, the commander announced. Dr. Santos, get your team on the shuttle. Be ready to launch the moment. We create a diversion. While Dr. Santos led the wounded to the intact shuttle, Alan, Commander Zix Vorel, Trencor, and Rixtal took positions near the failing doors. When they break through, Alan instructed, aim for the central mass of each creature. That's where the control node should be. The commander nodded grimly. If we fall, Lieutenant, the shuttle must escape. The coalition must be warned. We won't fall, Alan said with more confidence than he felt. The doors burst open with a thunderous crash. Creatures poured into the shuttle bay, their bodies a horrific fusion of flesh, metal, and pulsing growths. They moved differently now, more coordinated, more purposeful. They were learning. Fire! Commander Zix Vorel shouted. The modified weapons discharged with a high-pitched whine. Bolts of energy struck the lead creatures, causing the electronic components in their bodies to spark and fail. Unlike before, they didn't immediately recover. The creatures dropped, their systems overloaded. It's working! Rixtal called out excitedly. Don't celebrate yet, Alan warned. Look. Behind the fallen creatures, a new wave appeared. These were different, covered in what looked like makeshift shielding, with fewer exposed electronic components. They've already adapted, the commander said grimly. Move toward the exit, Alan ordered. We need to draw them away from the shuttle. The team backed away, firing continuously to hold the creatures at bay. Behind them, the evacuation shuttle's engines roared to life. Dr. Santos's voice came through their comms. We're ready for launch. Good luck, strike team. The shuttle bay. Doors overhead began to open, revealing the star-filled void of space. The evacuation shuttle lifted off, maneuvering carefully toward the opening. As the shuttle escaped, the strike team retreated through the side exit, the creatures in close pursuit. Alan sealed the door behind them, buying precious seconds. Which way to the server room? Commander Zix Vorel asked, his breathing heavy from exertion. Alan checked his datapad. Through the central corridor, then down 2 levels. It's not far, but it will be heavily defended, the commander finished. Hayes would protect his control center. As if confirming their fears, alarms blared throughout the station. Dr. Hayes's voice echoed from the speakers. "Impressive escape, Commander. Lieutenant. Murphy is proving to be quite resourceful, as expected from someone who knows the Harbingers so well. But your resistance is pointless. The evolution has begun. Join us, or perish." The lights in the corridor flickered ominously. The growths on the walls pulsed in rhythm, spreading visibly before their eyes. "We need to move," Alan said urgently. "Now." The strike team pressed forward, weapons ready, heading toward the heart of the station where Hayes waited for them. With each step, Alan felt the weight of history pressing on him, the legacy of his parents, the dismissed legends of human resistance, and now, the fate of countless lives if the Void Hive escaped this station. The final confrontation awaited. The server room door stood before them, sealed and reinforced. The small strike team had fought through 3 waves of creatures to reach this point. Trencor nursed a fresh wound on his leg. Rixtal's left arm hung limp at his side. Even Commander Zix Vorel showed signs of fatigue, his blue scales dulled with exertion. Only Alan appeared focused, his eyes clear as he studied the door's security panel. "I can bypass it," he said quietly. "But once we're in, Hayes will throw everything he has at us." "How much time do you need?" Commander Zix Vorel asked. 2 minutes to break the encryption, maybe 3. The commander nodded. "We will give you that time." Alan looked up at the massive Arcturian. Gone was the dismissive alien who had mocked human capabilities just hours ago. In his place stood a battle-worn commander who now spoke, to Alan as an equal. "Once we're inside," Alan explained, "we need to reach the main terminal. If I can access the core systems, I might be able to disrupt Hayes' control over the Void Hive organisms." "Might?" Rixtal questioned. "No guarantees with technology this advanced," Alan admitted. "But it's our best shot." Trencor checked his modified weapon. "My people have a saying, the uncertain path walked with conviction becomes certain." Alan smiled briefly. "We have a similar saying on Earth. Nothing ventured, nothing gained." "Enough philosophy," the commander said, though not unkindly. "Begin your work, Lieutenant." Alan connected his datapad to the security panel and started the bypass sequence. Behind them, the sounds of approaching creatures echoed through the corridor. "Here they come," warned Rixtal. "Hold the line, Commander." Zix Vorel ordered, raising his weapon. "Give Murphy the time he needs." The creatures appeared around the corner. More than before, their bodies further evolved with metallic plating that reflected the corridor's dim lighting. They moved with eerie coordination, like parts of a single organism. The strike team opened fire, their modified weapons still effective but less so than before. The creatures had adapted as Alan had warned they would. 60 seconds, Alan called, his fingers moving rapidly over the datapad. The first wave of creatures fell under concentrated fire, but more appeared behind them. The strike team was forced to back up against the server room door, forming a protective semicircle around Alan. 30 seconds, he reported. A particularly large creature launched itself at Commander Zix Vorel. The Arcturian caught it with his lower arms while firing his weapon point blank with his upper ones. The creature's body convulsed, but its claws dug deep into the commander's scaled flesh. Rixtal moved to help his commander, leaving his side of the line exposed. 3 smaller creatures darted through the gap, heading straight for Alan. "Look out!" Trencor shouted. Alan glanced up from his work to see the creatures almost upon him. There was no time to draw his weapon. Instead, he grabbed a small device from his belt, his last EMP generator, and slammed it against the floor. The pulse disabled the creatures momentarily, but also disrupted his bypass program. "No," he growled, quickly restarting the sequence. "I need another minute." "We don't have a minute," Commander Zix Vorel said grimly, tossing aside the smoking remains of the large creature. Blue blood flowed freely from deep wounds in his torso. The commander made a decision. "Trencor, Rixtal, fall back to the secondary position. Prepare the charges." "Sir?" Rixtal questioned. "That's an order." The 2 officers retreated reluctantly. down a side passage, leaving Alan and the commander alone at the door. "What are you doing?" Alan asked without pausing his work. "Giving you the time you need," the commander replied simply. He positioned himself in front of Alan, all four arms holding weapons. "Finish it." More creatures appeared, flooding the corridor. The commander fired continuously, dropping the front ranks, but they kept coming. "Almost there," Alan said, the bypass program nearing completion. "Just a few more seconds." The commander's weapons overheated from continuous use. He dropped them and drew a ceremonial blade from his belt, a curved weapon almost as long as Alan's arm. "I never believed," Zix said, "that your parents held off alien forces for 3 days in Chicago." He swung the blade in a wide arc, cutting down 2 creatures that got too close. "I understand now," he continued. "Some legends are born of truth." The security panel flashed green. The door slid open. "It's done," Alan shouted. "Let's go." He turned to see the commander surrounded by creatures, fighting with desperate ferocity. Zix looked back at Alan. "Go. Complete the mission." "Not without you," Alan insisted, raising his weapon. "You must," the commander roared, "for both our species." Before Alan could argue further, the creatures swarmed over Zix. The massive Arcturian disappeared beneath a writhing mass of biomechanical horror. With a curse, Alan darted through the server room door. The panel allowed him to seal it from the inside, but he knew it wouldn't hold for long. The server room was a circular chamber filled with humming equipment. In the center stood Dr. Hayes, his back to Alan as he worked at a large, transparent display. "I've been expecting you, Lieutenant," Hayes said without turning. "Your little team put up quite a fight. Impressive." "It's over, Hayes," Alan said, raising his weapon. "Step away from the console." Hayes turned slowly, a sad smile on his face. Biomechanical growths now covered the left side of his body, pulsing, with the same rhythm as the creatures outside. "Over." "No, Alan. It's just beginning." He gestured to the screens around them, showing different sections of the station. "My children are learning, adapting. Soon they'll reach the Intrepid and Access, its communication systems. From there, it's just a small jump to the Coalition network." "You're insane," Alan whispered. "The Void Hive will consume everything, including you." "They won't consume me," Hayes corrected. "I am their guide, their father. Through this," he tapped an implant at the base of his skull, "I control them, and soon, the galaxy." Alan kept his weapon steady. "Why? Why risk everything? Betray your own species?" "Because we deserve better," Hayes snapped. "After first contact, the Coalition treated us like children, restricted our access to technology, limited our expansion. Humanity was meant for more." "So, you'll destroy us to prove a point?" "To evolve us," Hayes countered. "The Void Hive doesn't destroy. It transforms, improves." A loud bang at the door indicated the creatures were trying to break through. Alan didn't have much time. "Last chance, Hayes. Shut it down." The scientist shook his head. "You don't give orders here." Alan fired, but Hayes moved with inhuman speed, dodging the shot. The biomechanical side of his body rippled and extended, forming a shield, you see? Hayes laughed. "Already better than human." Alan dove behind a server bank as Hayes launched a counterattack, biomechanical tendrils whipping through the air. He needed a new plan. His weapon wasn't enough. Then he saw it. The station's power core access terminal. If he could overload the core, it would destroy the station and everything on it, including the Void Hive. As Hayes searched for him, Alan made a dash for the terminal. His fingers flew across the controls, initiating the overload sequence. "Warning, core destabilization. In progress," announced the station's computer. "Evacuation recommended. 5 minutes to critical failure." "No," Hayes screamed, realizing what Alan had done. "You'll kill us all." "Better than letting the Void Hive escape," Alan replied, standing his ground. "It ends here." The door burst open. Creatures poured into the server room, but they didn't attack Alan. Instead, they gathered around Hayes, who was now shouting contradictory commands, his control wavering. "Go to the escape pods," Hayes finally said to Alan, his voice suddenly calm. "There's still time." "I'm not leaving," Alan replied. "I need to make sure this is finished." Hayes studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Like your parents in Chicago. You knew them?" "I knew of them. Their sacrifice inspired my work." Hayes looked almost regretful. "Perhaps I misunderstood what made humans special all along." The station shuddered as the power core began to fail. Emergency lights flashed, bathing the room in red. "Core critical in 3 minutes," announced the computer. Hayes and his creatures retreated, leaving Alan alone in the server room. He sank to the floor, exhausted. His mission was almost complete. The void hive would be destroyed. The door opened. Again, Alan raised his weapon, expecting more creatures. Instead, Commander Zix Vorel stumbled in, bloody and wounded but alive. "Commander," Alan exclaimed. "How—" "Your legends," the Arcturian interrupted, leaning heavily against the wall. "The one about human stubbornness. It seems I needed to practice it myself." Despite everything, Alan laughed. He helped the commander to his feet. "We need to go. This place is about to blow." "Lead the way, Lieutenant," Zix Vorel said. "I find myself believing in human miracles today." Together they limped toward the emergency evacuation pods, leaving behind the legacy of the Void Hive, and creating a new legend, one of human and alien standing together against impossible odds. This time, no one would mock the story of what happened on Epsilon 9. This time, the legend would be believed.